Bernie Sanders could certainly use a little support, some allies, maybe from his colleague Elizabeth Warren. So why is she staying on the sidelines?
All right, here to weigh in is David Tafuri. He's a former State Department official, foreign policy contributor at The Hill, and Marshall Kosloff, director of media at the Lincoln Network. David, welcome to the show. And Marshall, it's good to see you as always.
Thank you.
All right, so let's start off with this, with Elizabeth Warren endorsement, or lack of endorsement, coming out from the New York Times. Lots of reasons here being given, Dave, about why she's not endorsing, essentially saying that she told advisors even before Super Tuesday that she wasn't necessarily on board. She didn't think he could win, and she wants to preserve any power that she might have in a Biden administration. And, of course, the whole sexism accusation. I mean, what do you make of this generally about her lack of decision? Is it contra to her brand for saying, being the progressive warrior and now trying to preserve her power as she tried to do in 2016 when she didn't endorse Hillary Clinton?
I think there's two ways to look at this. Perhaps she really cares about the policy. Mm-hmm. She realizes that Sanders is probably not going to win. And even though he's more close to her policy, she thinks by reserving an endorsement and working with Biden, if Biden is the nominee, that she actually has a better chance of passing her agenda and Sanders' agenda, and perhaps will even be in the administration for Biden. Yeah. The other way to look at it is that she only cares about her own political future, cares less about the policies that she supports. And again, she wants something out of the Biden administration. She wants to run again in the future, and she doesn't want to help Sanders.
Right.
I mean, Marshall, here's the problem for her is what she did in 2016 and what she has done now is so counter to the way that she sells herself. She's supposed to be this progressive fighter, in it for the values, going to wake up in the morning and fight for the people and go to bed at night fighting for the people. She came into politics literally fighting against Joe Biden and this bankruptcy bill and his coziness to the credit card industry as the senator from MBNA. And so when it comes down to this stark contrast between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, once again, you sit on your hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you actually got to an issue, which is this is counter to what she sold herself as, but it's actually more in favor of what she's actually good at. So what she's actually good at is starting the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. What she's actually good at is pressuring the Obama administration not to appoint Larry Summers to a position at the Federal Reserve. So I think at the end of the day, the inside baseball knife fighting is her sort of using her voice in those sort of technocratic power battles. Actually, it's sort of a better fit for her. I think what she's going to be doing in terms of her actual interests going into the fall is she's sending a list of people to the Biden administration that she's going to demand go into government. That's what her plan of Hillary was too. So we could debate whether that's snaky or not, but frankly, it's better. She's actually good.
I think
she's actually good at that.
You know what's funny? You're absolutely right. It's just negating what she ran on.
Yeah.
Right, Dave? And that's what it is. It's like, he's right. And I actually said this. I was like, yeah, she's kind of more like a policy person and like all this. And she's like more like she was running for Secretary of the Treasury. She's now like running for president. And I think you're right, but it negates the brand and what she sold herself as, and frankly raised a lot of money, billing herself as what she's running on.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
But the reality is that both she and Sanders have a better chance of passing their agenda if Biden is the president, there's a moderate president, and the two of them work together as progressives in the Senate, especially if the Senate becomes closer to being a Democratic majority and if the Democrats keep the House. They actually have a chance. Whereas if Sanders were the president, I think Republicans would backlash against that. There's no way they would pass his agenda.
Anyway?
I think in the Senate that
I mean, if you think Republicans are going to work with Joe Biden, that's a complete fantasy. We had 8 years of Barack Obama and Joe Biden. Please help me. Let's have a grand bargain. Let's cut Social Security together. And they wouldn't even work with them on that. So the idea they're going to work with the Biden administration is a fantasy. I also think for her, why did she have power vis-a-vis the Obama administration? Why did it matter when she called them out over their bad, appointments and was able to shift? It's because she had this credibility. Right? People believed in her. She had a movement behind her at that point. And now she's just like any other freaking politician, calculating what's best for her, trying to get herself in the best power positioning. You end up not being special. You're just like everyone else at that point.
Yeah, I think I think that's true during the campaign season, but I think at the end of the day, if you look at the Warren that we had before this election, which I think has really been disappointing on 15 different levels, I think we could look at the fact this is the person who wrote the two-income trap. She's not a normal senator. She is easily one of the smartest, frankly, most talented senators, and I'm being very precise to Sagar's point when I say senator, that we have. So I think she is going to play above. She's going to definitely outweigh herself post 2020, no matter what happens. So I think the question for her, and the other point too, and I think this goes to the sort of what are Sanders and Warren going to do, is I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of doom and gloom on this show today for a couple of different reasons, but the number one thing in their favor is that the progressive activists are going to continue being on the playing field after 2020. All of the moderate suburban anti-Trump voters who are going to fuel Biden's victory if he actually wins either the general election or his primary, they're going to be gone. So I think at the end of the day, they're going to have progressives are going to have a stronger position.
Here's the problem though, David, is especially, I mean, look, if Elizabeth Warren thinks she's going to end up VP to Joe Biden, I think that's a complete fantasy. There's no reason to put her on the ticket. She's an electoral liability. She got third in her home state. You'd have to be insane to put her on the ticket. I argued for Bernie Sanders to do it because his back was so up against the wall. But you have a choice in the matter. There's no way they're going to pick Elizabeth Warren. He's going to pick some typical neoliberal who will then succeed him. He'll probably serve one term if he is able to beat Trump and get into office. And then you have 8 more potential years of whatever neoliberal he puts at the top of the ticket. That's part of why progressives are in such despair, because they're not just staring down a potential Biden administration, which is incredibly depressing. They're potentially staring down 12 years of neoliberals at the head of the party.
Well, I think if you look at the electoral map, you look what happened on Tuesday, you have to say that the Sanders movement is not as strong even as it was in 2016. He didn't win the rural counties in Michigan, for instance, that he won in 2016. So progressives have to be practical, right? And the supporters of Warren and supporters of Sanders are going to have to work within a system. It may be a Biden presidency. It may be a vice president with Biden who's not from the progressives, although I think there is an argument for Biden to take Warren, especially if he wants to win over those supporters of Bernie and Warren. But I agree with you that he probably
of Bernie would not be won over by Elizabeth Warren on the ticket, by the way.
Yeah. And I think the question for progressives is sort of what now? And I think, it's coming from our conservative background, I think the actual useful sort of analog for them to look at is what did the right wing of the Republican Party do during the Obama era? They established places like Heritage Action that pushed from the right, the sort of center-right people in the sort of place there. Like, why was it that House leadership didn't make all these sort of neoliberal deals with President Obama? It's because the right was pressuring them. There were primaries. There were consequences. So the left has to translate that.
I think the Tea Party is in some ways the best, most useful model, because they were very effective at setting the agenda in this. They understood how even with
Dems, if a better Justice Dems, that's what it would look like.
The problem with Justice Dems is that they are monolithically left on everything.
Right.
So, if left on economics, great, obviously all the way there, but they also require all these litmus tests on cultural issues that make it a harder sell for most of America. But I think the Tea Party model is the right one because they understood how to use their relatively small numbers to actually wield power very effectively in this town.
And this is the interesting thing. I'm looking at that data, Dave, to your point, which is Sanders, he flopped in terms of his turnout. But it's interesting if you look at that generational number. And this is really, I think, the future squabble over politics, which is those people backed Sanders 77% to 19%. But it's flipped if you look at it 65 over. And so, when people are saying, Biden is assembling the Obama coalition, it drives me crazy because the Obama coalition was suburban, it was rich people, and it was young people and progressive activists. The progressive activists and young people, very unlikely these people are even going to turn out. And let's say that they even do. What does it look like? I mean, what is a Democratic Party for 12 years as these people age? It's very much kind of reminiscent of the 1964 election and how Barry Goldwater might have lost, but Ronald Reagan ended up winning on his agenda in 1980.
I completely agree with you. It's hard to call Biden's coalition something like what Obama had in 2008 because Obama was backed by young people principally. That's how he defeated Hillary in the nomination.
In Iowa,
and how he became the nominee. And that's not happened for Biden yet. But Biden has to figure that out. He's not going to beat Trump without the young people, and that would augur toward him picking a vice presidential candidate for the ticket who's someone young, like maybe Buttigieg, right? To rally the young people.
Not gonna win young
Buttigieg
people.
had no support.
Well, he could, and he at least balances
There's no
the ticket.
evidence of that.
He balances the ticket
Just
age-wise.
because someone is young doesn't mean young people like them. I mean, who's the rock star among young people is the oldest guy in the race. So like identity, millennial backs millennial, it just doesn't work.
But it's not going to be Bernie.
Yeah.
Of course it's not going to be Bernie, but that's my point.
So there has to be someone else.
Who do you pick that wins over young people? Who has trust with the movement? There's very few people, frankly, and there are, and none of them are realistic in my mind in terms of Joe Biden picking them.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a wash because, and this is something that people have really talked about. With Ryan Grimm writes about this, how for 30 years the Democratic Party was pretty hostile to left-leaning people, sort of the DSA to the Bernie Sanders. The reason why Bernie Sanders is the only person filling the space right now is that for 30 years, everyone 20 years younger than him was basically kicked out of the party.
Right.
That's sort of the 1990s era. So what actually really sucks if you're a Democrat in this situation is there is no version of Mayor Pete that's a Democratic socialist. There's no 48-year-old governor of a northeastern or sort of like western state who could sort of fill that category. So we're really seeing how we have way too many players on the center left and not enough players on the reasonable.
You have some people who are coming up now, are new and young, but they're not in position to run for president yet.
Yeah, most of the squad literally couldn't be president if they wanted to.
Exactly.
So, there you go.
All right, guys, stick with us. More right after this.